Let me tell you about the day my driveway declared war on a middle-aged woman's soap operas. It didn't happen all at once, of course. Wars rarely do. They start with skirmishes, border disputes over garbage cans, and aesthetically disruptive lawn gnomes. But the casus belli, the real line in the sand, or in this case, the line in the concrete, was glare. It began on a Saturday so perfect it felt like a stock photo. The sky was an impeccable, cloudless blue. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and distant barbecue. I was in my garage, a sanctuary of pegboard and organized tools, with a cold IPA sweating onto a coaster beside me. This was the dream. After a decade of living in apartments where my upstairs neighbor practiced tap dancing at 3 a.m. and the guy next door communicated exclusively through death metal, this suburban peace was my nirvana. Pleasant View Estates, they called it. The name was a masterpiece of marketing optimism. The only pleasant view was of the 40 other houses built from the same 3 blueprints, each painted in a slightly different shade of beige, taupe, or what the HOA charter generously called oatmeal whisper. It was a symphony of conformity, and I, for a time, was a willing musician in the orchestra. My contribution to this beige utopia was a brand new, professionally poured and sealed concrete driveway. It was a magnificent slab of pale gray, smooth and unblemished. I loved it with the irrational passion a man usually reserves for his first car or a perfectly grilled steak. It was clean. It was functional. It was, in a word, driveway-I. It was the most inoffensive object on a street designed from the ground up to be inoffensive. Or so I thought. That's when I first saw her. Carol. She was power-walking past my house, her visor pulled down low like a fighter pilot preparing for combat. Tucked under her arm was a Pomeranian that looked like a perpetually startled cotton ball. She didn't so much walk the dog as she propelled it forward with her own sheer force of will. I was in my driveway, admiring the tight seal around the expansion joints, and I gave her the universally accepted friendly neighbor wave. Her response was to stop dead in her tracks. She didn't wave back. She just stared. She squinted at my house, her head tilting slowly as if she were a building inspector who'd just discovered a fatal structural flaw. Her gaze drifted down, settling on my beautiful, innocent driveway. The squint intensified. "Good morning," I offered, the words feeling suddenly inadequate. She emitted a sound, a sort of clipped grunt that acknowledged my existence without endorsing it, and then continued her march down the sidewalk, her tiny dog scrambling to keep up. It was an ominous encounter. A silent, one-sided declaration that I was being watched. My property was under surveillance by the beige Gestapo. A few days later, the Cold War turned hot. Tucked under the handle of my front door was a crisp, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a friendly note from a neighbor. The header read, "Pleasant View Estates, Homeowners Association, official notice of bylaw infraction." My stomach tightened. I opened it. The violation was so mind-numbingly petty I had to read it twice. Violation Code 7. Section 4. Waste Receptacle Visibility. Description of infraction. On the morning of Tuesday, September 9th, the resident's municipal waste receptacle remained visible from the street at 9:35 a.m., a full 35 minutes past the mandated 9 a.m. post-collection concealment time. This constitutes a Class 2 violation. A record of this has been added to the property's file. The notice was, of course, signed by Carol in her capacity as president of the HOA Welcoming and Bylaw Enforcement Committee. I saw her later that day, weeding her petunias with surgical precision. I walked over, notice in hand, determined to apply a dose of reason. "Hey, Carol," I said, forcing a smile. "Got your note." A little intense on the garbage can thing, don't you think? The truck was running late. She stood up, wiping a non-existent speck of dirt from her glove. The bylaws are the bylaws, Alex, she said, using my name like it was a naughty word. They are the thin line separating civilization from anarchy. Is that what you want? Anarchy on our cul-de-sac? I blinked. For 35 minutes, I think civilization might have survived. Her smile was thin and sharp. It begins with a garbage can, and it ends with people painting their houses purple and keeping livestock. We must hold the line. That was just the beginning. A week later, another notice appeared. My lawn was a 1/4 inch over the regulated 3-inch maximum height. The week after that, a small, cheerful garden gnome my sister had given me as a housewarming gift was cited for being aesthetically disruptive. I half expected to get a citation for the pattern of my breathing. Each notice was a paper cut, a small annoyance designed to remind me who was in charge. I was living in her world. She was just letting me pay the mortgage. Section 1.3, The Glare of War. The inciting incident. The final straw, the complaint that would launch 1,000 gallons of spite, came on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was high and bright. I was getting the mail when Carol ambushed me from across the street. She was wearing a pair of enormous wraparound sunglasses that made her look like a villain from a low-budget sci-fi movie. "Alex," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk, now." I sighed, clutching a handful of pizza coupons. "What is it this time, Carol? Is my mailbox leaning at an unapproved angle?" She marched across the street, stopping a few feet from me. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at the ground between us. "Your driveway." "Is it parked illegally?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because it hasn't moved since it was poured." "Don't be facetious," she snapped. "It's the glare. It's blinding." I looked down at my pale, gray, matte finish concrete driveway. It was absorbing the sunlight with the enthusiasm of a goth at a beach party. A black asphalt road would have been more reflective. "The glare," I repeated slowly, tasting the absurdity of the words. "Yes," she said, pushing her sunglasses up her nose. "When the afternoon sun hits it, at precisely the 3 to 5 p.m. window, the reflection, the glare, shines directly into my living room window. It creates a distracting shimmer on my television screen. It disrupts my soaps. It's a genuine nuisance." I was speechless. My brain was trying to process the physics of her claim and coming up with nothing. This was not a problem of light. It was a problem of a woman with too much time on her hands and a soul powered by pure, unadulterated pettiness. "Carol," I said, trying one last time to be the voice of reason. "It's concrete. It's about as reflective as a potato. Are you sure it's not a passing car or a UFO or something?" "I know what I see, Alex," she said, her voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. "And I see a violation of Bylaw 11C. No property shall generate excessive light, noise, or other emissions that infringe upon a neighbor's right to peaceful enjoyment of their property." She had a bylaw for it. Of course she did. "I've already filed a formal complaint with the board," she continued, a smug look of triumph spreading across her face. "You have 30 days to remedy the situation." She turned on her heel and marched back to her house, leaving me standing in my own driveway, next to my non-leaning mailbox, holding a fistful of junk mail. I looked down at the slab of concrete, the alleged source of neighborhood disruption. It just sat there, gray and innocent. And in that moment, a storm of malicious compliance began to gather in my soul. Oh, I would remedy the situation, all right. I was going to fix the glare. I was going to fix it so hard she'd wish she'd never heard the word. The official letter arrived 3 days later, as promised. It was a document of such breathtaking stupidity that I briefly considered framing it. The language was a glorious word salad of corporate buzzwords and legal-sounding nonsense, likely drafted by Carol herself during a particularly boring episode of The Young and the Restless. Official notice to remedy. Property glare. Nuisance. PGN. Dear Mr. Henderson, this letter serves as a formal notification regarding a violation of Pleasant View Estates Bylaw 11C concerning the peaceful enjoyment of community members. A formal complaint has been received and verified by the Bylaw Enforcement Committee regarding excessive solar glare originating from the concrete driveway surface at your property. This glare nuisance has been found to negatively impact the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood and poses a significant disruption to adjacent properties during peak sunlight hours. Pursuant to the HOA Charter, you are hereby required to take immediate and effective measures to mitigate the reflectivity of the aforementioned surface. You have 30 days from the date of this notice to present a remediation plan to the committee for approval. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines beginning at $50 per day. For a harmonious community, the Pleasant View HOA Board. It was a masterpiece. Aesthetic harmony. Peak sunlight hours. They made it sound like my driveway was a rogue star going supernova. I immediately picked up the phone and called Dave. "You are not going to believe this," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Let me guess." Dave's voice crackled through the speaker. "Carol cited you for having unaesthetic thoughts about her prize-winning begonias." "Worse, I'm a public nuisance. My driveway is committing acts of aggression against her television." I read the letter to him, my voice dripping with sarcasm. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a loud snort, and then a wave of deep, rolling laughter. "She said what?" he finally managed to gasp, choking back another laugh. "Your driveway is too bright? Alex, are you sure you didn't move in next to a vampire? This is classic vampire behavior." "Worse," I repeated. "She's the president of the HOA. At least a vampire would have the decency to only be annoying at night." "So, what are you going to do?" he asked. "Are you going to build a tiny roof over it? Cover it in shag carpeting?" "I don't know," I sighed, pacing my kitchen. "I'm open to suggestions. I was thinking of just throwing a bucket of mud on it every morning." "That's not thinking big enough," Dave said, his voice turning serious, though I could still hear the humor in it. "You need to solve this problem permanently. You have to make it so non-reflective that it defies physics. You should just, I don't know, paint it black or something?" And just like that, the seed was planted. It was a joke, of course, a silly, off-the-cuff remark, but it didn't leave my mind. It sat there, in the back of my brain, and started to grow. Before I could descend into glorious, unhinged madness, I had to at least pretend to be a reasonable human being. My first move was an act of appeasement. I drove to the hardware store, a place of hope and sawdust, and wandered the aisles. I found what I thought was the perfect solution, a premium heavy-duty concrete sealant with a low-sheen matte gray finish. The picture on the can showed a driveway that was a pleasant, stormy charcoal color. Non-threatening, unglary, perfect. I spent an entire Saturday, a beautiful Saturday I could have spent doing literally anything else, painstakingly applying the stuff. The fumes were nauseating. The work was back-breaking. But I did it. When I was done, my driveway was no longer pale gray. It was a sophisticated, slightly darker gray. It looked great. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next afternoon, I saw Carol march out of her house holding her smartphone like a tricorder from Star Trek. She came to the edge of my property and began scanning my driveway with it. I walked outside, wiping my hands on a rag. "What's going on, Carol?" "I'm taking a reading," she said, not looking at me. She showed me her screen. She had a light meter app open. A little needle was hovering over a number. "I'm still registering an unacceptable level of lumens." "This is a half measure, Alex. This is a slap in the face to the community and to the remediation process." "A slap in the face? I spent my whole weekend making my driveway darker for you." "It's not dark enough," she said, as if that were a perfectly normal thing to say. "The glare is still there. It's just a darker glare." I took a deep breath, counting to 10. My next attempt at compromise was to address the alleged trajectory of the light. "Okay, look," I said, pointing. "What if I plant a large hedge right here, along the property line? A big, light-blocking wall of green. It'll block any possible reflection, and you won't even have to look at my offensive driveway anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "Absolutely not. Bylaw 19F clearly states that any hedge or shrubbery on a property line dividing two lots must be maintained at a height not to exceed 4 feet, so as not to obstruct sight lines." She smirked. "It wouldn't be tall enough to block anything, unless you plan on getting a bonsai tree to do the job of an oak." That was when she played her final card. She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy, tri-fold brochure. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake helpfulness, "if you're serious about being a good neighbor, you'd consider a real solution. The Hendersons, down at the end of the cul-de-sac, had these gorgeous, dark slate paving stones installed. They absorb the light beautifully." She handed me the brochure. It was for a company called Artisan Hardscapes and Patios. I opened it. The prices were astronomical. A full paver driveway would cost more than my car. And that's when I finally understood. This was never about the glare. It was about power. It was about her wanting to control every inch of her little suburban fiefdom. She didn't want a solution. She wanted me to bend the knee and spend a fortune to prove my loyalty to her beige-colored cult. I looked from the brochure to her smug face to my perfectly fine, now slightly darker gray driveway. The switch in my brain flipped. The circuit breaker for being a reasonable adult popped, and the emergency generator for petty, disproportionate revenge roared to life. That night, my house was dark except for the glow of my laptop screen. The remnants of a 6-pack of IPAs sat on the desk beside me. My anger had simmered down into a cold, focused resolve. Dave's joke from the other day echoed in my head. Paint it black. But regular black wouldn't do. That was a solution. I wasn't interested in a solution anymore. I was interested in a statement. I opened my web browser and typed a series of search queries, each one a step further down the rabbit hole of malicious compliance. How to reduce driveway glare. Darkest gray concrete paint. Matte black outdoor paint. Can you paint a driveway black legally? Angriest way to solve neighbor dispute. And then the magic words. What is the blackest paint in the world? The internet answered. I fell into a vortex of articles about material science, nanotechnology, and artistic rivalries. I learned about VantaBlack, a substance made of carbon nanotubes that could absorb 99.96% of visible light. I watched videos of it in action. They'd coat a crumpled piece of aluminum foil in it, and it would instantly look like a flat, featureless black shape. They coated a bronze statue in it, and all its detail vanished, leaving only a disconcerting silhouette. It didn't look like something that was painted black. It looked like a hole had been cut in the fabric of reality. It was disorienting. It was unsettling. It was perfect. Of course, VantaBlack itself was nearly impossible for a regular person to acquire, tied up in exclusive artistic licenses and scientific applications, but the internet, as always, provided alternatives. I found a whole subculture of artists and creators dedicated to making the most absurdly black paints commercially available. There was black 3.0, singularity black, and a Japanese paint called Musu black, which claimed to absorb 99.4% of light. I found a website for an American company that had developed their own version, an acrylic polymer paint designed for art installations and theatrical sets. They sold it in gallon cans. The product description was a thing of beauty. Creates a visually arresting void of near-perfect black. Objects coated in this paint lose all visible texture and appear as a flat, two-dimensional hole in space. For outdoor use, multiple coats and a special matte sealer are required. A slow, evil grin spread across my face. The kind you see on a cartoon villain right after they've finished tying someone to a railroad track. This wasn't just malicious compliance. This was performance art. I wasn't just going to make my driveway less bright. I was going to turn it into a suburban singularity, a monument to darkness right in the heart of Pleasant View Estates. It would be a featureless, light-devouring rectangle of pure, unadulterated spite. My cursor hovered over the Add to Cart button. I calculated the square footage. I'd need 12 gallons of the paint and another 4 gallons of the special matte sealer. The total in the shopping cart made my eyes water. It was an obscene amount of money to spend on a joke. But then I pictured Carol's face. I pictured her squinting at my driveway, not because of the glare, but because her brain couldn't comprehend what she was looking at. I clicked Confirm Purchase. The war was on. A week later, a large, unmarked van pulled up to my curb. A man who looked like he wrestled bears for a living wheeled a pallet up to my garage. On it were 16 identical, heavy-duty black cans with stark white warning labels. There was no fancy branding, just a product code and a list of chemical compounds. It looked less like paint and more like a prop from a secret government project. The delivery guy grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Geez, buddy," he said, eyeing the ominous stack of cans. "Goth convention in town, or are you painting a black hole?" I looked him dead in the eye, my face a mask of seriousness. "Yes," I said. He stared at me for a beat, then let out a short, barking laugh. "All right, man, you do you." He got his signature and drove off, leaving me alone with my weapons of mass darkness. I felt a giddy, almost manic energy as I hauled the cans into my garage. This was real. This was happening. I couldn't just unleash this stuff on the world without a test run, though. I needed to see its power for myself. My eyes landed on the perfect test subject, the garden gnome, the one cited for being aesthetically disruptive. He had been languishing in a corner of the garage, a ceramic pariah. Today he would be reborn. I laid out some newspaper, popped open a can of the paint, and stirred. It was bizarre. The black was so deep that the paint on the stir stick seemed to disappear, leaving just a disembodied hand holding a stick that terminated in a blob of nothing. It didn't reflect the garage light at all. With a cheap brush, I began to paint the gnome. It was a transformative experience. With the first stroke, his cheerful red hat vanished. With the second, his cheeky grin was gone. I covered every inch of him, his little fishing rod, his boots, his beard. When I was done, he was no longer a gnome. He was a gnome-shaped hole. All his features, all the texture of the ceramic, all the contours that gave him shape and personality, were gone, swallowed by the paint. All that remained was a flat, two-dimensional silhouette that looked like it had been cut out of the universe with a pair of scissors. I let it dry, then carefully carried it outside and placed it in my front yard flower bed. The effect was immediate and deeply unsettling. The bright afternoon sun beat down on it, but the gnome just drank it all in. It cast no shadow. It had no highlights. It was just a void. A cartoon hole made real. I watched a squirrel scamper across the lawn, get within 5 feet of the gnome, and then stop, chittering nervously before bolting in the opposite direction. It was more perfect than I ever could have imagined. Now it was time to scale up. As much as I wanted to, I knew I couldn't paint a 600-square-foot driveway by myself with the same precision the job required. This wasn't a DIY project. It was an artistic installation of pure spite. I needed professionals. My search for a contractor was, to put it mildly, a challenge. The first company I called, Pro Finish Painters, hung up on me. The conversation lasted less than a minute. You want to do what? Paint concrete? With black hole paint? Sir, is this a prank call? Click. The second guy, from Precision Coatings, at least heard me out. He listened patiently, let out a long, weary sigh, and then said, "Son, I've been painting houses for 40 years. I've seen a lot of weird things, but what you're asking for, it just ain't right. I can't be a part of it." He sounded like he was turning down a job from the devil himself. The third one just laughed for 30 seconds and then hung up. I was beginning to lose hope. I was envisioning myself out there with a roller for the next 3 weeks, going slowly insane from the fumes. I made one last call, to a company at the bottom of the list with a decidedly low-budget name. 2 guys and a paintbrush. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Manny's Paint. You need something painted?" "Yes," I said, deciding to be direct. "I have a highly unusual exterior painting job. It involves a driveway and a very specific experimental acrylic paint." There was a pause. "Unusual how? And how much you payin'?" This was promising. I explained the situation, leaving out the part about my neighbor and focusing on the technical challenge. I offered to pay double their standard square footage rate, all in cash. "Cash, you say?" The voice, Manny, grunted. "Me and Sal will be there in an hour to take a look. Don't waste our time." An hour later, a beat-up white van that looked like it had survived a war pulled into my driveway. The side was crudely painted with 2 guys and a paintbrush and a phone number. 2 men got out. One was short, stocky, with a thick mustache and a weary look in his eyes. Manny. The other was tall, thin, and looked perpetually worried, Sal. They had paint splatters on their clothes that looked old enough to have historical significance. "You the guy with the weird driveway job?" Manny asked, sizing me up. "That's me, Alex. Thanks for coming." "Let's see the paint," Sal said, his eyes darting around suspiciously, as if he expected a hidden camera crew to jump out from the bushes. I led them into the garage and pointed at the stack of black cans. Manny picked one up, grunting at the weight. He read the label, his brow furrowed. "Never heard of it. Ultra black polymer? Sounds expensive." "It was," I said. "Now for the proof of concept." I led them to the front yard and pointed at the gnome in the flower bed. "Behold!" They both stopped and stared. Sal took a step back. Manny leaned in, squinting. "What in the Looney Tunes is this?" Sal whispered, like he was afraid the gnome would hear him. "It's like... it's not there. My eyes feel weird looking at it." Manny reached out a thick, calloused finger and poked the gnome's hat. "It's solid," he announced, surprised. "Huh." He looked from the gnome back to me. "And you want us to do this? To your whole driveway?" "Every square inch," I confirmed. "I want it to drink the sun. I need perfect, clean edges and a completely uniform finish. Can you do it?" Sal looked at Manny, his face a mask of concern. "Manny, I don't know about this. This is some weird stuff. What if it opens a portal to another dimension? I ain't getting sucked into no portal for double time." Manny ignored him. He was looking at the driveway, then back at the can in his hand, a professional glint in his eye. He was intrigued by the challenge. "It'll take a lot of prep. We'll have to pressure wash the whole thing. Then maybe a light acid etch to make sure this stuff bonds right. 2 coats of the black, 1 coat of the sealer you got. It's a 3-day job." "So you'll do it?" I asked, a wave of relief washing over me. Manny looked at Sal, then back at me. He stroked his mustache. "The price is double our normal rate. For a job this weird, we get a weirdness tax, so triple, and half the cash up front." "Deal," I said without hesitation. Sal just shook his head. "I'm telling you, Manny, this is bad juju. We're going to be painting a curse on this man's house." Manny clapped him on the shoulder. "For triple the rate, Sal, I'd paint the devil's front porch. We start Monday." Monday morning arrived, bright and early. At 7 a.m. sharp, the 2 guys and a paintbrush van rumbled up my street. The first day was all prep. They pressure washed my now dark gray driveway with a machine that roared like a jet engine, blasting away my failed attempt at appeasement. Then they did the acid etch, a smelly chemical process that left the concrete looking pale and porous, a perfect blank canvas for my masterpiece. The real show began on Tuesday. They arrived at dawn and began taping off the edges of the driveway with military precision. The lines were perfectly straight, separating the concrete from my lawn and the sidewalk. Neighbors on their morning walks slowed down, their curiosity piqued. Carol watched from her living room window, a motionless silhouette behind the glass. I could feel the heat of her disapproval from 50 yards away. Then, they opened the cans. Manny and Sal worked with an efficient, practiced rhythm. Manny handled the roller with the long extension pole, laying down the first thick, black strokes. Sal worked the edges with a brush, cutting in with a surgeon's steady hand. The transformation was breathtaking. As the roller passed over the pale gray concrete, it simply ceased to exist. It was replaced by a patch of absolute, featureless black. There was no texture, no variation, just a spreading stain of pure nothing. It looked like the world's least successful game of paint a picture. As the blackness spread, the contractors started getting spooked. "Sal, you see where the driveway ends and the grass starts?" Manny called out, halfway through the first coat. "Barely," Sal yelled back. "It's messing with my depth perception. I feel like if I step on it, I'm going to fall into the newspaper comics." By midday, they had finished the first coat. They took a lunch break, sitting on my lawn and eating sandwiches, refusing to get too close to their handiwork. "I keep expecting Wile E. Coyote to run out and hold up a sign," Sal muttered, staring at the driveway. Carol chose that moment to make her move. She marched over, her arms crossed. "Excuse me," she said to Manny. "I am the president of the Homeowners Association. What exactly is going on here?" Manny took a slow bite of his sandwich, chewed and swallowed. "Ma'am," he said, not looking at her, "we're painting a driveway. It's a job." "What color is that?" she demanded. "It's black, ma'am," Sal offered. "I can see it's black," she snapped. "Why are you painting it black?" Manny took another bite. "Customer wants it black, we paint it black. You want your driveway painted, we can give you a quote." Defeated, she spun around and stomped back to her house. They spent the rest of the day applying the second coat, and the entire third day applying the special non-reflective matte sealer. Each layer only intensified the effect. When they were finally done, they peeled off the blue painter's tape, revealing edges so crisp and clean they looked photoshopped. The job was finished. My driveway was a perfect 600-square-foot rectangle of the void. It didn't reflect the sky, it didn't reflect the sun. It just sat there, a silent, black hole in the middle of a relentlessly beige neighborhood. Manny and Sal packed up their gear in silence. I came out and handed Manny a thick envelope of cash. He counted it, then nodded. "Job's done," he said. "It looks incredible," I said with genuine admiration. "Better than I ever imagined." Sal just shook his head, looking at the driveway with a mixture of fear and awe. "It ain't right," he whispered. "It's like God spilled his inkwell." They got in their van and drove away, not even a wave goodbye. They just left. Two ordinary men who had been paid an extraordinary amount of money to briefly touch the void. And I was left alone, standing in my yard, admiring my masterpiece. Operation Black Hole Sun was complete. Now all I had to do was wait for the screaming to start. I didn't have to wait long. The first unintended consequence manifested within the hour. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, my driveway began its work. Being the color of a collapsed star, it absorbed every single photon that hit it. All that energy had to go somewhere, and it went into heat. A visible, shimmering haze, like the kind you see over asphalt on a scorching summer day, began to rise from the surface. The air directly above it became a pocket of superheated thermal energy. It was my own personal microclimate. I walked to the edge of it and held my hand out. It felt like holding my hand over a barbecue grill. The optical illusions were even better. My driveway no longer looked like a solid surface. It looked like a hole, a portal, a glitch in the matrix. When an autumn leaf drifted down from my neighbor's oak tree and landed on it, it didn't look like a leaf on a driveway. It looked like a leaf floating in a black, empty space before it shriveled from the heat and turned to dust. My next-door neighbor, a quiet man named Bill, came out to get his mail. He stopped, did a classic cartoon double-take, and then slowly walked over. "Alex," he said, his eyes wide. What did you do?" "HOA issue," I said simply. "Had a bit of a glare problem." "A glare problem?" He looked at the inky black rectangle, then back at me. "I think you might have overcorrected." A small smile played on his lips. "Carol?" I just nodded. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Good for you, man. Good for you." He went back inside, a new spring in his step. The wildlife noticed too. Birds flying overhead would suddenly divert their course, creating a strange, invisible no-fly zone over my property. A fat bumblebee buzzed towards it, seemed to hit an invisible wall of heat, and then drunkenly flew away. But the best reaction came from Carol's husband, Bob. Bob was a man who had been beaten down by years of living with a human tornado of complaints. He was the living embodiment of the word henpecked. He shuffled out to get their afternoon paper, dressed in a sad, beige cardigan that matched their house. He got to the end of his driveway, stopped, and saw my creation. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there for what must have been a full minute, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at my driveway, then up at the sky, then back at my driveway, as if trying to reconcile what his eyes were telling him with the known laws of physics. Finally, he shook his head slowly, turned around without the newspaper, and shuffled back inside. It was a silent, profound admission of defeat. The main event began at 4:15 p.m., right in the middle of her soap opera window. The front door of Carol's house flew open with such force that it bounced off the stoop. She stormed across her perfectly manicured lawn, her face a terrifying shade of crimson. She looked like a teapot that was about to whistle. "What have you done?" she shrieked, the words tearing through the peaceful afternoon air. I was ready. I was sitting on my porch, sipping a lemonade, the very picture of unconcerned innocence. "Afternoon, Carol," I said calmly. "I see you've noticed my renovations. I took your complaint to heart and remedied the glare. You're welcome." "Remedied?" she sputtered, gesturing wildly at the black rectangle. "This is not a remedy. This is a public menace. It's a monstrosity. It's too dark." The sweet, delicious irony of that statement was so perfect it was almost a physical sensation. I had to fight to keep a straight face. Well, you can't have it both ways, Carol. Too bright, too dark. You're a regular Goldilocks of driveway luminance. I thought this was a good compromise. Compromise? She screamed. Her eyes darted around, looking for some new horror to latch onto. They landed on her prized flock of plastic lawn flamingos, positioned near the property line. One of them, Flamingo Alpha, was looking a little droopy. The radiant heat wafting off my driveway was having a slow, melting effect on the cheap plastic. As we watched, its elegant neck began to sag, its head drooping downwards in a sad, final bow. The sight of her melting flamingo sent Carol over the edge. She let out a sound that was half gasp, half shriek. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking with rage. "That's it! I'm calling the police!" She stabbed at the screen and put the phone to her ear. Her side of the conversation was a gift from the comedy gods. "Yes, hello. 911? I need to report a menace. My neighbor. He's installed a hazard. He painted a hole in the ground." There was a pause as the dispatcher presumably asked for clarification. "No, a literal hole. Well, it looks like a hole. It's swallowing the light. Send the police. And maybe a physicist. And it's melting my property. My flamingo is melting. Hello? Are you listening to me?" She snapped the phone shut, her chest heaving. The flamingo let out a soft plastic sigh and slumped completely onto its side, a fallen pink soldier in a ridiculous neighborhood war. Carol looked like her brain was about to short-circuit. 15 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled slowly down our street and parked at the curb. 2 officers got out. They were both young, with that look of weary resignation that cops get when they know they're responding to a call that's 99% nonsense. Let's call them Krupke and Miller. Krupke, the taller one, adjusted his belt and looked at the scene. His eyes fell on my driveway and he stopped, his professional composure faltering for a second. Miller just blinked. "Okay," Krupke said, approaching us. Dispatch said something about a void and a melted flamingo. "That's him! He's the one!" Carol shrieked, pointing at me. "Officer, arrest him!" "Afternoon, officers," I said, giving them a polite nod. "Beautiful day, isn't it? A little warm right here, though." Miller walked cautiously to the edge of the driveway, peering down at it like it was a crime scene. "Is that paint?" he asked his partner, utterly baffled. "He did it on purpose," Carol insisted, her voice cracking. "It's a blight! Look what it did to my flamingo!" She pointed at the pink puddle on her lawn. Krupke turned to me, an expression of profound exhaustion on his face. "Sir," he began, struggling to form a coherent question. Did you melt your neighbor's flamingo with your driveway?" "I believe the sun did the melting, officer," I replied, choosing my words carefully. My driveway was merely an accomplice by virtue of its color, which, I might add, is a color not regulated by any city ordinance I'm aware of. I checked. Krupke sighed. He looked at his partner, who just shrugged. They were in uncharted territory. They walked the perimeter of the driveway, their boots staying safely on the grass. Miller cautiously extended a foot and held it over the surface, pulling it back quickly from the heat. "It's really hot," he said, stating the obvious. Krupke pulled out his notepad, trying to figure out what to write. "So, let me get this straight. Your neighbor complained her driveway was too bright." "That's correct," I said. "So you painted it black," he continued. "The blackest black I could find," I clarified, "to be thorough." "And now it's too dark," he finished, looking at Carol. "And hot." "It's a nuisance," she insisted. Krupke clicked his pen. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't know what law has been broken here. There's no ordinance against having a hot driveway, or a black one, or an ugly one, for that matter. He looked at me. As far as I can tell, your driveway is just aggressively black. Aggressively black. I like that, I said. I might put that on a plaque. The officer shot me a warning look before turning back to Carol. This is a civil matter, ma'am. Your best bet is to take it up with your homeowners association. The look on Carol's face was one of pure, impotent fury. The HOA was her. She had called in the cavalry, and they were telling her to solve it herself. It was the ultimate bureaucratic buck-passing, and it was glorious. "This is ridiculous," she fumed. "That it is, ma'am," Krupke agreed. "Have a nice day." He and Miller got back in their cruiser, and I could see them through the windshield, talking and shaking their heads. As they drove away, I was almost certain I saw Miller start to laugh. The law had come, and the law had left, utterly baffled. The battle was over. I had won. The police leaving without citing me was not the end of the war, but it was the end of the decisive battle. Carol's ultimate weapon, appealing to a higher authority, had failed spectacularly. Her only remaining recourse was the HOA, which was like complaining to a manager about their own bad behavior. The flurry of official letters that followed was predictable and, frankly, hilarious. They started with demands, citing bylaws about maintaining community aesthetic standards and unapproved property modifications. I had, in fact, broken those rules. I consulted a lawyer friend of Dave's who, after laughing for 5 straight minutes, confirmed my position. I'd broken the HOA's internal rules, but no actual laws. The worst they could do was fine me, and fine me they did. The first bill was for $250 for an unapproved exterior color modification. I paid it immediately, and in the memo line of the check I wrote, "Glare Remediation Services." Meanwhile, the story of the void driveway went viral on the local community Facebook group. Someone posted a picture of it, and the comment section exploded. Brenda M. "OMG, I saw that yesterday. I thought it was a tarp. What on earth is it?" Tom P. "I heard the guy who lives there is some kind of weird artist. My kid says it looks like a portal to the Minecraft end dimension." Carol B. Yes, her. This is not a laughing matter. This is a dangerous and unsightly property modification done out of pure spite, and it is being handled by the HOA board. Please respect our community's privacy. Bill S. My neighbor. At Carol B. It's just a driveway, Carol. Lighten up. That last comment got 147 likes. For the next few weeks, there was a steady stream of cars driving slowly down our street. People would park, get out, and take pictures. I became a minor local legend, a suburban folk hero. They called me the VantaBlack vigilante, the Sultan of Spite, the patron saint of petty revenge. Most of my neighbors, the ones who had also suffered under Carol's tyrannical reign of beige, were secretly on my side. They'd give me a subtle thumbs up when they collected their mail or a knowing nod as they drove by. The fines kept coming, once a month like clockwork, and I kept paying them. I started thinking of it as a subscription fee for my own peace of mind and daily amusement. The effect on Carol was profound. Her power, which was built entirely on intimidation and the assumption that everyone would fold to her ridiculous demands, was shattered. She had been publicly defeated by an opponent who had simply refused to play her game. She stopped her power walks past my house. She stopped leaving notices. In fact, she stopped making eye contact with me altogether. If we were both outside at the same time, she would suddenly become intensely interested in a particular weed in her flower bed until I had gone back inside. Her reign of terror was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet, awkward shuffle of a deposed dictator. The true moment of victory, the confirmation that I had done the right thing, came about a month later. I was taking out the recycling one evening when Bob, Carol's husband, was doing the same. We were alone, standing at the curb under the orange glow of the streetlights. He looked at me, then over at my perfectly black, light-swallowing driveway, and then back at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something, maybe try to defend his wife's honor. Instead, a small, weary smile touched his lips. He gave me a slow, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of pure, unadulterated respect from a fellow prisoner who had just watched someone successfully tunnel out of Alcatraz. Then he scurried back inside before his warden could see him fraternizing with the enemy. That quiet, man-to-man nod was the only validation I ever needed. It was better than winning any argument. It was a silent acknowledgement that I hadn't just fought for my own sanity. I had struck a blow for his, too, and so a new normal settled over Pleasant View Estates. My driveway became just another weird feature of the neighborhood. The initial tourist traffic died down, and it was accepted as a permanent installation. The kids on the street loved it. They'd dare each other to run across it as fast as they could, and they used it as a landmark. "Meet me at the Black Hole," they'd say. The story ends as it began. I'm sitting on my porch, sipping a cold IPA on a perfect Saturday afternoon. The sky is blue, the air smells like cut grass, and the neighborhood is peaceful. But it's a different kind of peace now. It's a peace I carved out for myself, not one that was dictated to me. I look at my driveway. It's still a bizarre, unsettling, and beautiful patch of nothingness. It gets hot in the summer, and it looks especially weird in the snow, like a rectangle that the universe forgot to color in. I'm still paying those monthly HOA fines, and it's worth every single penny. Sometimes, to preserve the peace, you have to be willing to engage in a little bit of creative chaos. You have to be willing to meet absurdity with even greater absurdity. You have to be willing to stare into the void. Or, in my case, build one right in your front yard. The glare, I am happy to report, is no longer an issue.